Welcome back, folks. You know, in today's America, you need a front row seat just to keep up with how absurd the circus has become. We're living in a time where up is down, criminals are victims, and somehow protecting people who break the law is supposed to make us feel safer. The political left, especially their elite city leaders, have turned compassion into a contact sport, where the only ones getting tackled are law-abiding citizens. And nobody's playing the game harder than Boston's very own Mystal Wu, who's decided that the best way to protect her city is to keep criminal illegal aliens on the streets. That's right. The same folks who want to ban plastic straws think harboring felons is progressive policy. So buckle up, because what you're about to watch is a masterclass in how the modern left will twist logic, language, and law to turn chaos into virtue, all while pretending you're the crazy one.
What do you say to the people who, in your constituency, who might feel like, hey, why are we doing this? What's the big deal with this sanctuary city thing? If people are illegally in the country, shouldn't we arrest them and get rid of them? What is the big deal?
Yeah, we are, again, we're the safest city because we're safe for everyone. In a community where over a quarter of your residents were born in another country, if people are afraid to drop their kids off at school or call 911 when they need help or share information when they actually have information to report about a crime that happened, that makes everyone less safe, whether or not you are an immigrant, whether or not you're here in this country 6 generations or just arrived. So we're really focused on being that home for everyone, and it's worked. And so all of the buzz around, you know, whether these kinds of cities that are more welcoming for immigrants are more dangerous, it's about a false narrative that immigrants are somehow more likely to commit crimes or cause harm, and that is just simply not true. We know that in our city, where our immigrant communities are entrepreneurs, are holding up the best hospitals in the country, the universities and jobs that we all rely on. And in order to make sure that we can keep that progress going, everyone has to feel part of it.
Let's break down Mayor Mystal Wu's nonsense and torch this soft-on-crime fantasy she's selling, because what she's peddling is not only delusional, it's dangerous. She opens with the classic emotional manipulation tactic, saying, we're safe because we're safe for everyone. It's the political version of saying, if we just love the criminals hard enough, they'll stop being criminals. She's purposely equivocating, using the word safe in 2 completely different ways. Public safety and emotional safety are not the same thing, but Wu wants you to conflate the two so you'll feel bad for questioning her policy of protecting criminal illegal aliens. Then she trots out the old appeal to fear in reverse. She claims that without sanctuary policies, immigrants will be too scared to call the police. But here's the thing. According to the Department of Justice's National Crime Victimization Survey from 2017 to 2019, immigrants, including non-citizens, report crimes to police at rates equal to or higher than U.S.-born citizens. That's right. Wu's entire justification for obstructing federal law is based on a provable lie. Wu also throws in a classic false dichotomy, suggesting the only options are total sanctuary policies or immigrant communities living in fear. That's garbage. The real choice is between protecting criminal aliens who commit violent crimes versus cooperating with federal law enforcement to remove them while keeping law-abiding immigrants safe. No one is saying deport the immigrant nurse or restaurant worker. They're saying deport the convicted rapist, drug dealer, and MS-13 gang member you're sheltering under the guise of compassion. And let's not ignore the deliberate misdirection when she says all the buzz is a false narrative that immigrants are somehow more likely to commit crimes. That's a textbook straw man. Nobody credible is claiming that all immigrants are criminals. The issue is specifically with illegal aliens who commit crimes and sanctuary policies preventing ICE from removing them. And on that front, the data is clear. Over 662,000 non-citizens with criminal histories are currently on ICE's non-detained docket, meaning they've been convicted or charged with crimes but aren't being deported. That's not buzz. That's cold, hard reality. That has changed under Trump, but there's still a whole hell of a lot more that has to be changed. Wu also conveniently ignores the very real blood on the hands of sanctuary city policies. In her own backyard, ICE busted 5 illegal aliens, including 4 alleged child rapists and an MS-13 gang member who were walking free because Boston officials refused to honor detainer requests. One of them, a Haitian migrant, allegedly raped a 15-year-old girl. That's not an abstract fear tactic. That's a direct, measurable consequence of Wu's policies. And let's be clear, Wu's argument isn't about public safety, it's about ideological theater. She's perfectly happy to gamble with your family's safety so she can virtue signal her progressive credentials on The Daily Show. Meanwhile, working class Bostonians are footing the bill and facing the consequences of her decisions and actions. The data doesn't lie. The DOJ reported that 64% of federal arrests in 2018 involved non-citizens, even though they were only 7% of the population. And when Biden took office, over 6.2 million illegal aliens were encountered at the border, with over 2 million released into the country. Thousands of them have prior conviction for assault, rape, and murder. But Democrats don't want to do anything about that because they need the chaos so they can undo the fabric of society and install their communist utopia by subversion rather than by force. The playbook is still the same, except instead of it being a proletariat uprising, it's now a toppling of every principle that has made this country great by weakening it from within. And what do Wu and other Democrats say about all the statistics we just covered? Nothing. She deflects. She blames the federal system. She claims Boston is the safest city while hiding behind sanitized crime stats and pretending that her city's rising reports of migrant-linked violence aren't happening. Wu's entire narrative is a facade built on half-truths, logical fallacies, and selective compassion. It's not about keeping anyone safe. It's about protecting her political image while leaving Boston residents and immigrant communities themselves vulnerable to violent criminals who should have been deported long ago. This is what happens when ideology outweighs reality, when feelings trump facts, and when politicians like Michelle Wu choose to protect criminals over citizens, all while patting themselves on the back for how humane they think they are. And the real kicker, if you dare to point this out, they'll smear you as a xenophobe, while you're the one fighting for the safety of both Americans and law-abiding immigrants. The war is being fought on two fronts here, folks. Not only by importing this new voter class that's supposed to blue lock states, while sequentially undoing the fabric of what makes America great, but it's also being fought in a rhetorical sphere, and how the perception of reality is controlled by people like Wu and Democrats who want to frame everything as contrary to how you're experiencing reality so they can just shoehorn their agenda down everybody's throats. So welcome to the upside down of sanctuary politics, where safety means sheltering rapists and murderers, and compassion means letting crime flourish in the name of tolerance. And the delusion that these Democrats have is widely supported by their media apparatus, which offers absolutely no pushback to the most insane things that their mouthpieces claim. Like Elie Mystal. This man said this on MSNBC with his full chest.
And just to slightly push back on Mark, even if you tell me and you prove that they're gang members, I'm not so sure that I'm okay with them being sent off to be tortured in a foreign country, but I'll leave that aside.
Elie Mystal once again proves he's the king of unearned moral superiority, gracing us with yet another galaxy brain take, this time defending gang members under the banner of human rights. First off, let's call the sleight of hand happening here. Mystal isn't making an argument. He's playing the moral bluff card. Notice how he sets the stage. He says, even if you prove to me they're gang members. That's a rhetorical trick called moral absolutism. He's telling you, no amount of facts will change my position, which isn't an argument. It's a confession of irrationality. He's deliberately removing facts and consequences from the equation because he knows the facts obliterate his position. And let's zero in on the word he sneakily drops in. He says tortured. This is a classic appeal to emotion designed to short-circuit any rational debate. He frames deportation of convicted proven gang members, not shoplifters, not tax dodgers, but violent criminals who often run drug, rape, and extortion rings, as sending them to medieval dungeons in a third world hellhole. Reality check. The U.S. government is not airdropping MS-13 members in North Korean labor camps. A very small fraction of the most violent, criminal, illegal immigrants are being sent to a jail in El Salvador. Meanwhile, the vast majority of the other foreign nationals are being returned to their home countries, the very countries they claim to love so much until it's time to be held accountable. Now, what Mystal conveniently omits, because it annihilates his argument, is that these gang members are not U.S. citizens. They're foreign nationals who either broke into the country illegally or overstayed visas and then proceeded to rack up violent criminal records. There is no constitutional right to permanently reside in the United States after you've committed felony crimes, period. That's not not cruelty. That's called sovereignty. And let's be clear about who he's defending here. These aren't misunderstood teenagers spray painting walls. We're talking about documented gang members like the Trinidad cartel affiliates, the Chilean burglary crews, and the MS-13 thugs who dismember people, traffic women and children, and flood American streets with fentanyl. People who, once released into communities, rape, rob, assault, and kill. Does Mystal want to explain to the parents of Jocelyn Nungare, the 12-year-old girl brutally murdered in Texas by two Venezuelan illegals with gang ties, that deportation would have been too mean? Mystal's entire argument hinges on a fabricated choice. Either you let foreign violent criminals live in your country forever, or you're okay with them being tortured. That's a textbook false dilemma. The actual choice is this: deport proven violent offenders or let them terrorize American citizens and legal immigrants alike. There is no moral gray area here. Also, let's expose a projection happening. Mystal claims to care about human rights, but ignores the very real victims, American citizens and lawful immigrants, who are raped, murdered, and terrorized by these criminals. Where's his sympathy for the thousands of innocent lives destroyed by these gangs? Or does their suffering not trend on MSNBC? The left's entire sanctuary obsession is built on this kind of emotional blackmail and logical incoherence. They've turned victimhood into a hierarchy where violent foreign nationals are at the top and American citizens come dead last. It's moral theater with a body count. So let's be brutally honest. Elie Mystal's argument is not about compassion, it's about ideological performance art. It's a refusal to acknowledge the reality that protecting criminals means endangering innocent people. It's the political equivalent of setting your house on fire because you don't want the burglars to feel cold. So if you want to have a serious debate about immigration policy, vetting, and international human rights policies, fine, let's have it. But don't dress up the defense of violent foreign gang members as some enlightened moral position. It's not brave, it's not compassionate, it's cowardice wrapped in virtue signaling, and the only people paying the price for that cowardice are American citizens and law-abiding immigrants who deserve better. And speaking of deserving better, we all deserve better than The View. Let's be honest.
Now, Elon Musk has been engaging in a different kind of political theater with $1 million giveaway to Wisconsin voters, which will either, I just want to point out that, here in New York, we used to have something called a political machine called Tammany Hall. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that they stopped was them being able to pay people to vote the way they wanted them to pay. They used to call it quid pro quo.
Yeah, right.
And they stopped all of that. They said they didn't want that because it didn't represent what people wanted. It represented what
the buyer wanted.
The buyer, because you should not be able to buy it. But are any of these effective? We know it's effective because people need money. So I guess if someone's holding out and saying, you have the chance to win $1 million.
I think, of course, that's going to be effective for some people.
Whoopi Goldberg once again proving that having a microphone doesn't mean you know what you're talking about. First, let's address the core of this nonsense. Whoopi Goldberg accuses Elon Musk of engaging in a quid pro quo because he's offering $1 million giveaway tied to a petition. Not a vote, not a ballot, not a political endorsement, a petition. That's not a quid pro quo. That's literally how petitions work. You get people to sign something to make a point or demonstrate public support. No one's being paid to vote. No one's being coerced to pull a lever for a specific candidate. There is no exchange of official government action for personal gain. That is the legal and political definition of quid pro quo. What Elon's doing is called a sweepstakes. It's basically a raffle with extra steps. But Whoopi doesn't stop at misusing terms. She drags in a reference to Tammany Hall like she's teaching a high school civics class after one too many mimosas. Tammany Hall was about literal, documented vote buying, coercion, and political corruption. It was about stuffing ballot boxes, bribing officials, and controlling elections through mafia-style racketeering. Elon Musk, on the other hand, is literally giving away money to random people who signed their name on a digital sheet of paper. No vote, no promise of influence, no backroom deals. Comparing the two is like comparing a free sandwich giveaway with a mafia hit. All that being said, let's jump right into Whoopi's false equivalence. She takes the fact that people need money and tries to argue that offering cash in any political context is automatically corrupt. But by that logic, every political donation, every GoFundMe for a political cause, every nonprofit campaign would be a quid pro quo. So her claim is inherently absurd. Now, what's really going on is that Whoopi doesn't like Elon Musk's politics. She's mad that the billionaire she can't control is playing by his own rules and mobilizing people outside of the left's usual media and activist machine. So instead of engaging with what Elon's actually doing, she smears it with the dirtiest term she could think of, quid pro quo, hoping the audience is too lazy or ignorant to know what it means, or just in essence, just looking for confirmation bias so they can further hate Elon. That's part of what's happening here. But here's a real kicker. If Whoopi were remotely consistent, she'd apply the same logic to every Democrat politician who's ever handed out taxpayer-funded checks right before an election. Remember all the Obama stimulus payments? All the Biden student loan bailouts? All the welfare expansions days before early voting? Under her definition, that's a quid pro quo. But she'll never say that because, like most corporate leftists, her outrage is obviously selective and partisan. So let's cut through the noise. Elon Musk is giving away money to people who sign a petition. No one's being forced. No one's vote is being bought. No government action is being traded. Whoopi Goldberg is throwing around legal terms she clearly doesn't understand or willfully doesn't understand because, as usual, the left can't stand it when somebody challenges their influence game without their permission. Now, if you want to talk about political machines buying influence, Whoopi, let's start with a party that's been handing out taxpayer-funded bribes for decades, not a billionaire who's giving away his own money for petition signatures. Now, we do have to give credit where credit is due. The Democrats do have an amazing ability to self-own whenever they try to grandstand or virtue signal, and you have to look no further than Jasmine Crockett and what she recently said about DEI.
When I first became a public defender, I had no criminal defense experience, and I walked in and I told my boss, Charlie, I said, listen, you should hire me. He said, why? I said, because I'm black. Charlie looked at me like I was crazy.
Jasmine Crockett didn't accidentally say the quiet part out loud, folks. She boasted about it. This is what happens when the DEI crowd gets so high off their own supply, they start bragging about being hired because of their skin color instead of their qualifications, and they think it's some kind of power move. Now let's break down what just happened. Crockett straight up admits that when she applied for her job as a public defender, she had zero criminal defense experience, none. And instead of leading with skills, competence, or a single shred of merit, she proudly tells her would-be boss, you should hire me because I'm black. That's not a joke, that's a confession. That's her openly admitting that her entire pitch had nothing to do with ability and everything to do with identity. And we wonder why the justice system is broken, huh? Now, rhetorically, what Crockett is doing here is what's called the preemptive moral blackmail. She's banking on the fact that in today's hyper-politicized culture, no one wants to be the person who says, nope, I'm not hiring you just because of your race. She knows it's an impossible position to put an employer in because it's not a job interview, it's a hostage situation. If her employer says no, he's racist. If you say yes, you just hired someone who literally told you they're unqualified. That's not equity, that's extortion with a smile. This is also a textbook example of the soft bigotry of low expectations. Crockett isn't ashamed to admit she offered nothing but her skin color. She's proud of it because the entire DEI industrial complex has trained people like her to believe that identity alone is a credential, that being black or female or part of any marginalized group is inherently more valuable than competence, skill, or experience. And let's not forget the irony. The same people who scream about systemic racism and institutional oppression are the ones who openly admit they benefited from a system that handed them positions based on race, not merit. That's not justice. That's tokenism dressed up as empowerment. Now, let's add a little missing context here because Crockett may think this is a cute, edgy story to tell, but what she's actually describing is the rot at the core of DEI hiring practices that millions of Americans have grown to resent. This isn't theoretical. We've seen the results, whether it's disastrous public policy, failing schools, or incompetent prosecutors refusing to hold criminals accountable. The consequences of prioritizing identity over qualifications aren't abstract. They're lived realities for working class Americans who don't get to fall back on a diversity card when their lives get wrecked by bad leadership. And before anyone starts clutching pearls and shrieking, that's racist. No, it's not. It's the exact opposite. It's saying that people of every background should be hired, promoted, and trusted based on what they can do, not how they look. What Crockett just admitted is in progress. It's a scam, a con job that reduces people to their skin color and trains them to believe that that's all they need to succeed. The final kicker, if anyone on the right said something remotely like this, imagine a white politician saying, I told them to hire me because I was white. There'd be riots in the streets, congressional hearings, and wall-to-wall media coverage. But when it's Crockett, the media shrugs, or worse, they celebrate it. I think it goes without saying that this isn't empowerment. It's a confession of failure, of a system that's abandoned merit in favor of identity politics grifting. And the ones paying the price, everyday Americans who expect the people in charge to actually know what they're doing.
To have the sitting attorney general go on, and I'm gonna call it faux news. I know some of y'all love it, but it's fake to me. To have her go on Fox News and to then decide that she wanted to send a threat to me, it was wrong. Because here it is, she is the highest law enforcement agent in this country, and people are watching and they are consuming this information and they are believing that simply because I decided that I wanted to exercise my right to free speech, which I am not abridged from doing, that she then wanted to then politicize something that should not be politicized. I don't like Elon Musk. I'm gonna say it 50,000 times. I don't like him. I don't like that he going out there and he firing people. I think that he's a crook because somehow the rest of us can't sit around and get whatever federal contracts we want. The rest of us can't sit around and get law enforcement and get them somehow ordained as federal law enforcement to protect him. The rest of us can't get our dealerships protected by the federal government. That is somebody that is operating above the law. For whatever reason, just because he has a lot of money, more money than everybody else. And yes, I am happy to see that on my birthday, which is what I said, there were peaceful protests around this world against him because he is a problem. And so you never should have somebody that is sitting that high and is going to sit up here and threaten a sitting member of Congress when she knew good and well, if she watched the entire thing, that I specifically told protesters to make sure you consult with lawyers, just like I've told protesters over and over and over in the history of me advising people to go out and exercise their constitutional right. The fact that there are other sitting members that have received letters of threat from this new DOJ tells me that they are about retribution and they are not about following the law.
Jasmine Crockett is an absolute case study in how emotional, rambling, bad faith rhetoric and sheer ignorance can be weaponized to cover up bad behavior. Now let's start with her favorite crutch, the claim that Pam Bondi threatened her for exercising her free speech. That's a deliberate, manipulative distortion. Bondi didn't threaten Crockett's speech. She warned her about conduct, coordination, and potential incitement tied to a so-called global day of action that, whether she likes it or not, has already resulted in violent criminal attacks on Tesla dealerships and the EV charging stations. Free speech does not protect you from being held accountable when your speech is tied to real-world destruction and organized campaigns that conveniently turn peaceful after people get arrested for terrorism. Now, Crockett's entire defense here is built on a straw man. She frames the criticism as if Bondi wants to lock her up for not liking Elon Musk. No, Congresswoman, no one cares if you don't like Elon Musk. You're a public official leading a movement explicitly designed to financially and reputationally harm a private citizen and his company. One who, by the way, is currently tasked by President Trump to shrink the bloated, unaccountable federal bureaucracy. You're not protesting a policy. You're running a personal vendetta disguised as activism. And let's talk about her rhetoric. This entire statement is littered with loaded language and projection. Crockett accuses Elon Musk of being a crook because, wait for it, he fires people and wins federal contracts. That's not corruption. That's called capitalism. That's called the government hiring private contractors to do things cheaper and more efficiently than the government can do itself. Her gripe isn't with corruption. It's with the fact that Elon isn't bowing to her ideology or playing by her grievance politics. Then comes the ignorance parade. Crockett claims that she and others can't get law enforcement to protect their dealerships. That's because you don't own a multi-billion-dollar company receiving death threats and coordinated criminal attacks from the people your political allies are encouraging. When actual acts of vandalism and sabotage happen, like the ones that already have led to federal charges for domestic terrorism, it is literally law enforcement's job to protect critical infrastructure, including Teslas, when it's targeted by criminal campaigns, many of which are seemingly funded by George Soros. So I wonder how that works out. And let's address her deflection tactic the moment she name drops January 6th to imply some false equivalence. Classic. It's the left's favorite rhetorical escape hatch. What she conveniently ignores is that she is currently in a position of power, actively promoting and coordinating a campaign that has already resulted in criminal acts. January 6th is irrelevant here because you don't get to excuse today's bad behavior by pointing at someone else's bad behavior years ago. That's classic whataboutism, and it's intellectually bankrupt. Now, her entire argument rests on victimhood projection. She wants you to believe she's the oppressed party, when in reality, she's an elected official leveraging her platform to organize economic and social punishment against a private citizen because she doesn't like him. And let's call out the gall of her whining about retribution from the DOJ. This is the same party and political class that has spent the last 4 years weaponizing the federal government against political opponents, from parents to school board meetings to Catholic churches. But now that the shoe's on the other foot, suddenly it's political retribution. Spare us. And let's not forget the most self-incriminating, clownish line of her rant. She says, I don't like Elon Musk. I'm going to say it 50,000 times. That's not a legal defense. That's a public admission that her entire motivation is personal animus, not policy, not principles, but pure petty obsession. So to recap, Crockett is trying to launder a personal political tantrum into some grand act of civil disobedience, all while hiding behind the First Amendment protections she's clearly abusing. She's gaslighting the public, playing the victim, and hoping no one notices the real-world consequences of the movement she's cheerleading. And the irony, the only person abusing power and using their position to threaten others here is Jasmine Crockett herself. Pam Bondi's warning wasn't a threat, it was a reminder. You don't get to incite economic sabotage and hide behind free speech when people start ending up in handcuffs. So ask yourself, when did we start applauding elected officials who confuse petty vendettas with public service, who weaponize identity and outrage while shirking responsibility for the chaos they fuel? At what point did performative grievance replace competence? And when did the media decide that calling out reckless behavior is somehow more dangerous than the behavior itself? The truth is, this isn't about free speech or protest. It's about power, projection, and the slow corrosion of accountability. If someone in Crockett's position can casually confess to leading an ideological crusade against a private citizen while pretending to be the victim, what else are they selling you under the guise of justice? You don't have to like Elon Musk or anyone else in our government to recognize when the game is rigged. And the question is, how much longer are you willing to play along? You tell me in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.